thank you to everybody who has joined. We look forward to hearing your questions throughout the conversation. Please feel free to add any questions, type in your questions, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. The topic for today is a drive-through and outdoor branding refresh. If anything that we've learned in the last couple of months is that there's more than one revenue stream that has to be really performing well in order to be successful in the restaurant business these days. So our team of experts that we have here today are going to be sharing with you some of the things that they've learned over the years, and I'm going to introduce them to you and ask them to tell us all a little bit about themselves and their history with in this business. So we'll start with Gary Kurtz, who is our Vice President of Sales and Marketing. Gary?
Thanks, Gene. Welcome, everybody. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I've been working in drive-thrus now going on 7 years. Actually, I think we're closer to 7 than we were to 6, so that's cool. It's a great time to be in drive-thru. Hoping that everything turns out that it's a great time to be in the restaurant industry.
Grant Gusky is a Regional Vice President. Grant?
Yeah, I've been with the Howard Company now going on 10 years. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the fact that our company has people that have been here 30, 40 years in this industry. It's a great place to learn the industry as well as share that knowledge.
And Rod Klauser is a National Sales Manager. Rod?
Thanks, Gene. Yeah, I've been here at the Howard Company for about 10 years as well. Prior to coming to the Howard Company, I was also in the sign industry with some big national sign companies for about 20 years prior. So I have a lot of experience in indoor, outdoor drive-thrus. So look forward to talking about this.
Great. Well, I guess we should start with the big elephant in the room. The last couple of months have been certainly something that none of us have ever seen. What do you think the permanent effects of this event will be on the restaurant industry operations?
Well, I'll go ahead and start with this one because there's going to be a lot of different opinions about this. I think the last 3 months has shown a lot of operators how valuable drive-through, pickup, and with an app and delivery really are to the restaurant industry. That was always a challenge that restaurants had even before this COVID experience. But I think COVID really opened up almost Pandora's box in a sense with the fact that they couldn't have their dining rooms open. So they had to find other ways to generate the same, if not more, revenue. And I think the companies that are embracing the apps and embracing drive-through and pickup areas at their stores are the ones that are not only surviving this pandemic, but are thriving in it.
Gene, a couple of other things to add on that. Just looking at these restaurants that are adding people out in the drive-through lane to take orders just to speed the service up from just one person being able to order at the menu board at a time to letting that happen, as well as somebody taking orders, 2 and 3 cars behind them, getting that speed of service up in the drive-through. Because when you're looking at, even before COVID, 60, 70, 80% of your business coming through the drive-through, well, now that experience really has to be close to the same experience as if that customer was coming inside.
Yeah, and I just to kind of go with what they are saying, I think that we know now that restaurants that do well are going to probably have multiple revenue streams. Another brand that segment that we work a lot in is convenience stores. And the part that makes a great convenience store is that they have so many revenue streams. Restaurants are put into a position that they have to do this if they want to survive. So now it's a matter of, okay, so if we were spending 70% of our time making our interior of a restaurant look good, how do we get it so that if we're going to have 70% of the people go through our drive-through, how do we make that look just as good and just as appealing?
So, I think we've all seen a lot of stuff on social media of restaurants that are doing good things during this time, despite all the, roadblocks that have been put in their way. Do you have any interesting success stories that you've heard, companies that are just killing it or have taken a different approach or done something that they had never done before? Anybody have any good stories?
I'll start with that one, Gene. So I've been working with like a 75 location fried chicken chain, and what they've done is just made their overall business a lot healthier. Working a lot on marketing, trying to figure out that there's going to be people that can't go to the normal restaurants that they go to, getting them into the drive-through lane. And they've ended up being up, 30% over, last year's numbers. Where immediately when this kind of came through, it went down. But now we're looking at going, okay, so we're asking the same question. We're having this conversation. It's kind of the reason behind this webinar is to say, okay, now we figured out how to get some business. How do we get this long term?
Yeah, I've had several chains that are kind of reinventing themselves and looking at their footprint down the road, and do they really need a large dining room that costs money to keep clean and keep operating? Would that money be better invested in a smaller location that still has some seating, because that's not going to ever go away completely, but just to change the footprint and make the dining room a smaller area and spend more on the drive-through and the apps and that kind of thing. And that's where digital drive-through comes into a lot of play, because sometimes that's out of people's budgets. But if you eliminate personnel on the inside that have to clean, that opens up some more capital for putting it into the drive-through.
Hey, Grant, question for you. How, in your experience, how hard has it been for restaurants to get on to mobile apps, and how many of them are using mobile apps versus third-party delivery in what you see?
So I think it's a pretty good mix right now. If a large brand doesn't have a functional app that targets the millennials and targets the free points and the free meals, they were already behind before COVID started. But once COVID hit, it really opened up the loyalty on the apps. And a lot of my customers are signing exclusionary deals with some of those delivery services because they can eliminate the commissions right away. And it's a very interesting how the companies that were progressive before COVID and continue to look past COVID are the ones that are not down, even with this. Their same store revenues are up, even with this scary pandemic that's going on.
I think what's been interesting as well is it really, unfortunately forced a lot of restaurants to make some quick decisions right now. And I think many of them realize that curbside pickup, order ahead, and, delivery and getting the drive-through operating well. I mean, my wife and I, and of course the kids, they've all done this curbside pickup. And I tell you what, restaurants have really embraced that and have done a great job with that curbside pickup, and, adding signage to their, places to really promote, hey, these parking stalls are for curbside pickup and call ahead orders. And it really is helping them out and being able to keep the restaurant open without having anybody come inside.
And there are some brands that are even looking at redesigning their whole drive-through, their whole footprint, with having two different lanes in the drive-through, one for this traditional drive-through and then one for these delivery services, so they can just swing in, pick up their order and swing out and not have to wait in the line. or come in the building.
Yeah, and the online orders too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that does bring up sort of a question that I think comes up quite frequently, which is how does a small business owner or even a large brand, somebody who may have one location or a company that has 500, how do they even begin the process of trying to figure out how to configure their parking area, their you know, the flow in their parking lot to accommodate both the you know, the dine-in customers, the drive-through, and now the curbside, you know, pickup, and you know, all these three very, very important revenue streams.
Well, most restaurants, you know, do have, you know, architectural and engineering firms that work with them to help the design and layout of their restaurants. You know, we also will help restaurants in, okay, are you having a straight line drive-through, a curved lane drive-through? What's the spacing that is really the best for car stacks and orders, you know, from the menu board to the order pickup, and from entering the drive-through to the menu board? You know, we can help with that, you know, measuring and all that detail as well. But, you know, if you're starting a new restaurant and, you know, your architect needs some assistance, you know, by all means, the architect can contact us as well, and we can work through that detail with them. But, you know, it is you know, throwing it together at the last second at least gets something going, but you really want to put a little bit of detail behind it to make it work the best and flow the best as possible.
And I think the biggest hurdle in designing a new restaurant is the real estate. A lot of the drive-through locations now, the end caps and the standalones, the real estate's hard to find, and it's the more expensive. So I think, to answer your question, Gene, that the best thing to do, if you're building a restaurant from a slab in the ground, is to involve professionals that can help you design the drive-through right from the beginning. And if you are landlocked and have property that already has the building, you might have to get creative with the way the lanes work and signage, make some things one way and some things. So it's really about flow and stacking, and sometimes it's challenging.
Yeah, I really think that as business owners, a restaurant, whether you're opening your first restaurant or it's your 500th, you've really got to figure out a way to tell your story. You got to figure out what the story that you want to tell, and you need to work, like Grant said, you get to work with some professionals to figure out how that gets done. Because, you know, it's like, I talk to people and I go, well, I don't walk into your restaurant and go back and cook my food, right? So, because there's professional people that know a little bit more than that. So just rely on the people that have experience, but you have to know the story that you want to tell, and work with somebody who understands marketing, but can also understands the science behind drive-through, which is a big thing, you know, pre-sale boards and different, there's always places at restaurants, no matter what the real estate is, to tell the story, to guide customers in the direction that you want them to go.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit on something that both you, Gary, and you, Grant, said. Grant, you said it's all about flow and stacking, and Gary, you said you have to understand the science. So for somebody who is, you know, has really very little experience in this area, or perhaps has a lot of experience but has maybe multiple locations that they have to deal with, what do you mean by that? Explain that.
I'll take this first, Grant. So you have to engage those people as they come in to your property in some way, shape, or form. Get them excited, even if they have to wait in a drive-through for 5-10 minutes if it's busy. We have to get them excited to get to the front. Because if you pull into a parking lot and all you see is cars, and there's nothing to look forward to, you know, they may be reversing and going down the road to somewhere where they can just slide in quickly. But if we can show them pictures of food items or pricing on LTOs and like things about your restaurant that are going to get them excited, then they'll stay. And a lot of times, even if there's a lot of cars, you can move somebody through in 10 minutes. And I think that that's another thing to understand is that it used to be that, you know, you wanted your food just as fast as possible. Now you want to know that your food isn't just sitting on a rack somewhere, unless, you know, that's the basis of the business. So it's okay to be in a drive-through for a little while, to have people in a drive-through for a little while. But, you know, the amount of cars that you can fit in the drive-through, how do you get them closer to the building? And then having them see different forms of marketing and signage and things that are going to get them excited. And also for them to know kind of what they're looking for when they get up to the ordering point, when they actually do place their order. You know, it may shave 15 seconds off of that order time, but 15 seconds over, you know, your lunch and dinner rush times, you know, 30, 40 cars is a lot of time where you can get more monetary value through that.
And ultimately, if people are waiting in the drive-through and the food sucks, they're not going to come back anyway. So it ultimately comes down to the end product has to be something that brings them back. The goal of the drive-through is to make the experience while they're waiting for the food as enjoyable or as quick as possible. But ultimately, the food still has to be good.
Well, you know, it used to be that speed of service and just running people through the drive-through. That was kind of the norm for a while in the drive-through industry. But it seems like now customers are understanding that, hey, it may take a little bit longer today, and maybe that's just the way we're going to move. But if it takes longer, the food's hot, everything's correct, and all the items I've ordered are in that bag to take, they're willing to wait.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And it's all regarding signage and the way that you train your employees to move those cars around that lot so that it's an efficient working machine.
We have a question here from one of our attendees, and I think it fits right here in this spot. The question is, you know, is it with double drive-throughs are popping up in really all over the place. How do you measure the value of adding a double drive-through if there's just a couple of rushes during the day? I mean, is it worth it putting in, you know, the work to have a double drive-through? I think what he means is with, you know, basically just maybe a lunch and a dinner rush.
Well, that's might be above our pay grade to discuss if a double drive-through is right for an individual's business. My personal opinion is if you have a lunch rush and you have more than 10 cars waiting at your single drive-through, you should have 2 lanes. And like Rod mentioned earlier, you should have people out there actually taking the orders versus waiting for them to get to the communication system. And sometimes having a single lane drive-through and that order taker out there can also speed up the speed of service as well. I think the biggest hurdle to a double lane drive-through is real estate.
Correct. Yeah. And several brands that I work with, they are all putting double drive-throughs in because they see the value of being able to move people through a little faster, even though the speed isn't necessarily the number one thing, but to be able to prep and cook those orders as people are coming through and limit the wait as much as possible and have that food hot and ready when they're there. I think a lot of concepts are just understanding that that's just the way to go and make sure you're moving people through the drive-through just as quick as you need them to come through the drive-through.
And we just got a chat from Alan as an attendee here, who suggested that a second lane could be used solely for will call orders or mobile orders. And that's kind of what we discussed earlier. But yeah, that's, if you have the real estate and you only have the rushes for those lunch and dinner, Alan's right. You could use that second lane as the pickup window or even the Grubhub or mobile ordering.
Yeah, and if you're finding that, you know, the drive-through if you're at 30% of drive-through now, and now you're at 50 to 60, the drive-through can no longer be an afterthought. It has to be the focus of what you're doing. So having that second lane, for some people, it can be about optics, where if people are driving down your road and they see cars backed out to the end, they may keep going. If you can get another lane of cars where people are allowed to pull in, that's going to get you that's going to bring those people in, and it'll pay for itself in a quick amount of time. But I do think that Grant and Rod are right, is that having that secondary lane, that you can close if you don't need it, can be very important, just to bring more people through. And the more people see that everything's going quick and there's people keeping on going, the more likely that they'll be to come back again.
Yeah, and quick isn't always the desired result. I mean, there are some brands that have 5-6 minute wait time on their ready to make burgers, and they have designed their drive-throughs. They have pull ahead spots that you can pull ahead and let people that only have coffees or ice creams or desserts, they can go through the line faster as you're waiting for your food up at the pull ahead drop off area.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. We just had that question. What advice do you have for companies that make items to order?
As in nothing pre-made. I sounds like a place I'd like to visit. What do you guys have to say about that?
Well, you know that when the customer gets their food, it's going to be hot and ready for them, because it's what they ordered. It's, not sitting in a tray waiting to add it to a bun and put some cheese on it. And I think customers ultimately, when they come through a drive-through, that you get to place the order the way you want it. Again, that lead time push through the drive-through, customers understand there's going to be a little bit of wait for that, but just make sure it's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say if you can do it, having some kind of order app that new technology does allow you to say, okay, I'm here, and having places to pull in. It may not be a drive-through to put into that, to say, okay, hey, these are for orders, call this number when you get here. And then you have somebody on the inside that's working on those particular orders. Mm-hmm. Where especially if you know that it might take a while, you can train your customers to understand that this is a 10-minute process. Order it, and tell us when you want it, or just be ready to be pulled off to the side, and it'll be fresh as it can be when it's ready. But we want to make sure that we're not stopping people from getting through to that order point.
Do you think that there's a way in the lead up to actually getting in the drive-through lane that you can communicate? Well, I think, Gary, as you alluded to, or maybe it was you, Rod, people know what to expect if they've been to your place before. If it's a made-to-order place, Kaylee says it's a frozen dessert shop. Sounds even better.
Yeah.
Is there some way that you can let people know that as they're coming into the parking lot? I mean, you don't want to say, hey, by the way, this is going to be a 10-minute wait to get your stuff. There has to be a way to let people know that in a positive way, so that they're not disappointed with a longer wait.
Well, that's one of those things where, as more and more restaurants are starting to look at digital, and putting a preview board in kind of gives restaurants that ability to, hey, maybe we show people how we're actually cooking the food. Maybe we show, that, we don't have just an absorbent amount of pre-cooked stuff sitting here, that this is made your way. And just really show some of the LTOs and all of that you do. But in addition to that, show your people, show them what's behind the scene. Kind of gives the idea that, okay, this is for real. Yeah, it may take a minute or two longer, but boy, this might be pretty good because it's made exactly the way I want it.
And I don't know about you guys, but if I'm waiting in a long drive-through line and it moves quickly and I get the food I want and it's good, I don't care how long the line is the next time. I know I'm going to work my way through it. So it's all about educating the consumer with what the brand is. If it's a QSR fast food restaurant that is known for speed, you better have a fast drive-through. If it's a more upclass place, fast casual, they're already prepared that there's going to be a wait because the food is prepared for them. So it's about educating the consumer.
So one of the things that I would say is that we have to remember that there's different parts of the drive-through that are for different things. So if you zone out your drive-through and you say, okay, well, the entry is to make sure that people know where they're going to go. Make sure that we have some kind of a clearance area so that we're not cranking our building or, you know, hitting our canopy and things like that. And then you have your area where you can teach people about what you do. And then you have your area where, you know, you're working on your upsell. And then you have your order area. And then you have the idea that from there you have, okay, so is there anything else that we can get them to do next time before they leave? So it's just a matter of understanding this.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, Gary. You almost would need to map it out based on the physical space that you have and what your objectives are.
I think part of what you want to add to a drive-through as well, you know, okay, we're talking about the physical drive-through, the menu board, preview board, all of that. You know, how can we tell our customer who we are and what we do? But what about okay, that customer places a very complicated order, but it's, you know, their order and we're going to make it for them. You know, what about pull-outs and parking spots just for drive-through customers that, hey, if please pull into that parking stall, you know, number 1 over there, and we're going to bring your food out as fast as we can for you, to make sure that, you know, maybe that one order that's going to take quite a bit longer than the others isn't going to hold up the entire drive-through either.
And you have to be careful with the design of that as well. You don't want your employees to have to cross the car lines. You want them to be able to just go right up to the windows and hand out the foods. So again, it's something that you have to think about as you're designing the restaurant.
It's one thing that I've heard a number of times in this conversation is, I guess to put it succinctly, keeping the customer engaged throughout the experience. One of our guests mentioned how interesting it is to keep people entertained. Can you elaborate on that? How do you go about keeping our guests engaged throughout their entire experience, from the time they drive in the parking lot till the time they leave the parking lot?
So I'll take a first go at this. The way that I've always thought about it is that people just inherently, for some reason, always spend a lot of time and money on the interior part of their restaurant, is to tell the story. And it's not just one way to do it for every single restaurant. Like where you got to put something here, you got to put something there. You go inside of a restaurant, a quick service, a fast casual, a casual dining, anything, and you get a good idea of what that place is all about. And now when it's kind of switching over, where more people are more apt to go through the drive-through, people that were now that used to go into the inside are like, well, I still want this food, but I know I've got to get it another way. So you have to be able to tell that same story on the outside in some way. And for that to happen, it takes like a lot of conversation and a lot of back and forth between, you know, somebody who's doing the marketing, providing the signage, and the owners, who have to be the one that say, okay, like I love this, and our customers love it.
Yeah, and it's a discussion that has to be had, because it's not easy to tell a story in the drive-through when everyone's perception is there's a canopy and there's a menu board and I pull up an order and then I pick up my food. It's a whole different train of thought to have posters, outdoor posters, or a wing on the menu board that discusses catering and different options. A sign that has the app for this brand, so that you can go on that brand when you're waiting in the car, and you can sign up for the app and get the loyalty. So it's a whole bunch of different things that signage outside by the drive-through can help with.
Customer experience, Gary, you alluded a couple times to how I think important it is to tell your story inside of the restaurant. I think that's certainly still important. If you're a business that has one location, or if you're a business that has 500 locations, how do you go about making sure that the customer experience is the same no matter where they are in the country or the world, or whether they're walking in to order at the counter, or where they're driving up and parking at your curbside slot, or they're going through the drive-thru? I mean, what tools are there available to accomplish that?
So I always think about this scenario like I do when I talk about digital menu boards. So when you run a digital menu board program, which we run hundreds, is that at a corporate, you always want to have the brand identifiers. You have your brand standards, but then you kind of want to have this little corner of it where it's community. So when you walk into a restaurant or you go through a drive-thru, you have your staples that you see at every single location out there. But then if your restaurant's in Idaho, it's going to look different than it is in Florida, because the communities are different. So you got to kind of zone that out to say, okay, well, it's in Florida it's palm trees, and in somewhere else it's different. So I think that just understanding the communities a little bit better, but saying that you have, okay, there's 10 items and 8 of them are going to be corporate branded, so they're going to see the same thing every time, and 2 are going to be up to the local restaurant person or the community board or something like that.
And some of the larger brands want the same exact experience. I mean, you just think of McDonald's. You go into a McDonald's and you know what you're going to get. The menu board's going to be exactly the same. The bathroom's going to be clean. You know what to expect. The food is going to be consistent. And that's what large nationwide or even international brands are looking to do, is keep the messaging consistent. The regional brands, I agree with Gary, they're going to want to have that regional touch or that local touch to it. But most of the national brands that are growing at a fast pace, they want cookie cutter. They want the franchisee in Idaho to go to a store in Chicago and it's the same exact experience, the same exact look. And the hard part about while you're growing is finding partners that can grow with you. That's the tricky part, because some sign companies or some other brands are good at one thing, not so good at it on the other side of the country. So that's the tricky part. And ultimately, I'll say it again, the food has to be consistent. You don't want to have a beef sandwich in Illinois and go to that same brand in Arizona and have it taste different.
Mm-hmm. We have a question here. What is the ROI on digital menu boards versus printed graphic menu boards? Anybody have a good one on that one?
Well, that's always a tough one to put out there as far as exactly what your ROI is going to be. I think, more what customers are looking at lately as far as, digital menu boards is, what can I all accomplish with that digital menu board? As far as, showing, different food shots, showing different things that happen in the restaurants, but being able to be more creative with the restaurant menu board rather than just showing the same, 20 line items, that they have some flexibility to add some flair to it, but quickly change an item that's new, a promo, and be able to switch that out. And, when you want to try a new item, especially at a restaurant, putting that on the digital menu board and seeing, okay, let's put this out there right away for customers to see and get their opinion on it. It's going to be a little bit easier with digital than just static menu board. The ROI question comes up a lot, and at the end of the day, it's really more focused on, what are you trying to achieve as your brand with digital?
Yeah. And another thing with digital is you could have videos of how the food is prepared and show some creative things in the back of the house, like Gary mentioned earlier, where you can, people buy what they see. And if you see it being made, it's going to pique more interest. And as an operator, you kind of have them captive, more or less. So you can show them what you want to show them, meaning you can show them the high profitable items and make them look really good, and the ones that you're going to make the most money on.
Yeah. And I think that's it's always a hard discussion. If we were to say, all right, digital menu boards, a 30% uptick, there wouldn't be a static menu board left in the country.
Right.
So I think that it's really important when you're first sitting down with the company that you're looking for, is creating a roadmap and letting people know what your goals are, and measuring those goals, and understanding that it's in the design, it's in the automation, it's in the way that the pictures move. There's so many variables. And I've said this in videos before, is that if you just put up a static image of what you're trying to do now, it may hit some marks for you, just because it's crisp, it's clear. But if you're looking for a large ROI, you have to have a plan to say, okay, if we're going to get 10%, these are the things we need to do, and we need to be looking and measuring those things on a consistent basis. Maybe not on a yearly or bi-yearly basis. We have to be looking at that and changing that menu board several times throughout that year. But I do definitely think that a double-digit uptick is possible within your first year if you're doing things the right way and you have a good plan and you're willing to work.
Well, it's one of those.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Gary. It's one of those things as well that, with digital, your real estate that you're putting menu, graphics, LTOs, promos, and all that on is endless, because now, you're going to use it, day parting, being able to put, multiple items at different times of days, so you're not just limited to, the certain square footage that you have with static menus. So it's really the objective you're trying to achieve with your menu board. What is the end result? What is the return that you, the restaurant owner, are looking to achieve with digital menu boards?
Yep.
Sometimes the return is not necessarily measurable in dollars and cents, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
So we have Tariq who wants to ask a question here. I'm going to let you go ahead, Tariq. You have a question for the panel?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Nice to see you guys. I am Tariq, Operation Manager from KSA, Khubar. Currently, I am a multi-brand manager. Probably since this pandemic started, most of my stores, which is in the malls, we had a zero income, plus the stores which is freestanding. Only these stores which had a good business because we have only a drive-through. So I'm working in the coffee shops industry now. Since the country is a little bit opening, we are introducing a new products like the food sales dropped down in a very, very, very big way. But the coffee and the beverages still they are we are getting a very high margin, but the food is really day by day it's going down. And for us as a coffee shops, the food is not the most important thing. The beverages where we focus on and where we make our profit, because you know the food cost for us, it's only probably most of the coffee is water. So we have a very high margin on as a coffee shop. But from the food, we are ordering day by day, and we are wasting. We are at the same time we are trying to get each and every single penny to support the losses what we got probably on Q2. So I just want to know what kind of advice you can give us here for KSA market to push for the food purchases. So it could be like before. Put in your mind, please, that we are following a very high standard of food safety, personal hygiene, and store cleanliness and appearance. So these basic things we are doing it. What could you guys tell us, like we could improve our business better and better? Thank you so much.
So Tariq, we do a lot of, obviously we do a lot of menu boards, both interior and exterior. And
Tariq, could you please mute just for a second? Or I can
Yeah,
mute you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Gary.
So what I was going to say is that when we design menu boards, we look at that. So when we would have somebody, have a conversation with you on what you're trying to accomplish by the branding on your menu boards or your digital signage or whatever it is how do you move those things? How do you get people's eye on food or beverages? But you obviously want them to order your top margin items. But a lot of times if you're doing combo meals, if you order a coffee, your food is 20% off to keep moving that food and to get people in to try it, to do it. Try different things at different times of the day where that you're not having people in, or times where you can move more coffee if somebody buys some food. If it's middle in America, if it's the middle of the afternoon, a lot of coffee shops do happy hour drink specials. But if you could do that when you add a piece of food onto that, you can move it. But there is some design parts that you can do as well.
Well, I think it's especially
marketing.
Oh, go ahead. I think it's especially important right now as parts of the countries are opening. Are you fully open, not open? Make sure your customers, especially your loyal customers, know you're open. They're not going to just, well, I wonder if they're open, or should I call them, or should I not? What can you do for your business to let your customers know you're open now? Banners, signage, different things on billboards, radio ads. A lot of the TV stations are letting you put, hey, we're going to tell our customers that you're open as well, so let us know. So just work on that. Really determine with menu board design that where people look on the menus. We understand that, to know different parts of the menu board, people have a tendency to look first. So let companies like us help you out to determine how your menu should be laid out, and that should help your food sales as well.
Yeah, I think the question regarding personal hygiene and food safety is certainly heightened at this time. How do you let people know that, as they're coming into the restaurant? I mean, obviously you can use signage, there has to be some plan to make sure that people understand that you really are taking care to make sure that you're following, the personal hygiene. I hate to use the word rules, but practices, I guess, is the right word.
Well, it's one of those situations, Gene, that, if you're not, you're just hurting yourself. It's one of those things, restaurants tried to keep things clean, prior to all this, and they're going to do the same, and probably even do a better job. But it's just one of those things where, okay, people, it's an important thing now, and make sure people see your employees cleaning. I mean, that's really all they need to see.
And
We don't need signage and banners and all that. Hey, we're really keeping our place clean. Well, you should do that in the first place.
and to circle that back to the drive-through conversation, when people are going through your drive-through and they see that, that it's kind of worn out and old, and maybe somewhat rusted and things like that, they kind of get that same thought that may be how the back of your kitchen looks, or the interior of your stuff. So keeping that material, that signage refreshed, and the panels on the inside of everything clean and just looking clean, it's going to give that appearance. Even if you're putting stuff on the ground, painting on the ground, and just making sure that everything is fresh in there, and people feel nice when they're in that environment, and they look at it and go, oh man, this is great. It looks very nice. I can only imagine that the inside looks great too.
Here's a question, and then we'll wrap it up after this question, from Alan. He says, due to the uptick in drive-through traffic since COVID-19, speed of service has become paramount in keeping guests. I think that's probably always been pretty important, but certainly more now. If the kitchen gets behind on any single item, you have a small stack size. This impacts SOS directly. Can you guys discuss ways you have seen to address these types of issues?
I think we talked about this already a couple times, where you have some brands that take longer because they're making the meals right there for you. They design and have a pull ahead area. Best customer I can think of is a local one here in Wisconsin, Culver's. They give you a little number, say pull up to number 4 or pull up to number 3, and they have stalls assigned for the orders that take longer, so that it doesn't slow down everybody that's in the line. It just, the person that orders the thing that takes the longest also has an understanding that they're making this just for me, so I have to wait a little longer. But the guy that's just got a coffee behind him doesn't care how long his food takes. He wants to get through it. That answer the question? I think it's good, right?
Well, I guess we'll just wrap it up then. Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask the three of you to just summarize a little bit. If you had to do one or two things to make sure that your drive-through and curbside business was performing at optimal level, what would those 2 or 3 things be?
Big thing, being, me that helps people in the restaurant industry, and of course a consumer of food in the restaurant industry. And I tell you what, one of the worst things in a drive-through is when you pull up and you can hardly hear the person trying to take the order. The speaker, the mic is just terrible in the drive-through. That is something that needs to be just spot on. People want to feel like they're talking to the person and not really, talking to a machine. So just make sure your drive-through looks clean, the sound is clean, everything is just spot on right now in a drive-through, because how your drive-through looks, people are going to get that perception that that's how your restaurant and kitchen looks as well. So just, sound system is key right now as well.
Yeah, I personally think that if I spent the money to refresh it and get a nice drive-through, that's part of it. I think having employees out taking orders during the rushes, so that when you have a large line of cars, they get to talk to somebody, they get that warm, fuzzy feeling that I'm being taken care of. But I still have that nice drive-through, so when it's not a rush, the people still feel like they're being taken care of and have attention. So I think it's a multi-level thing where if you have the tablets ability, have somebody out there, have multiple people out there during rushes, and then have a clean, fresh look in the drive-through. I think that's the key right now.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple different things that I would end on. One is organization. Work on your organization and your procedures so that everybody on your team knows where to send people, and have it clearly marked throughout the course of your property. You know, if you think that you're going to be overly busy and you have a huge menu, you might want to pare that down to the things that most people are going to buy, and then utilize your technology. You know, find somebody who can help you with the online ordering, the delivery aspect, the drive-through, and just be prepared that this is kind of how it is now. You're going to need to run multiple revenue streams in order to keep up with the rest of the competition.
All right. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and like to let you know that we'll be doing this type of thing in the future again. So please follow us on social media, check our website for future opportunities. Thank you, Grant, Gary, and Rod. It was very enlightening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great time, guys.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.